Good morning. Back at it again. Just going to keep it going. One half of Ham here. I'm Guy Haberman. Good to see you. Good morning. Hope you got a little coffee. And this was not something I planned on talking about today, but these morning hangouts generally have not been the results of a big plan. So that's been fun. But yesterday we talked about quarterbacks, duh, and what's been going on this weekend or what happened over the weekend with 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 Brock Purdy finally getting back on the field or getting back on the field in Jacksonville, and Trey and Sam Darnold being at tight end U, and then Breer echoing what Schefter said last week when Breer was on Cowherd's show Monday about basically leaning towards Darnold. And so what it created was a lot of conversation in the comments, which is good. I get some good ideas from the comments. Historically, I've gotten some good ideas from the comments. And you get a flavor. But I think one thing that's happened, one comment in particular from viewer Bam Bam, and I went back and forth a little with him, but you can only do so much back and forth in the comments. It's easier to talk about stuff. Was why don't you guys bring up all the interceptions just being an example of all of the struggles Sam Darnold's had? Why don't you bring up 55 interceptions? When you talk about Sam Darnold, you gloss over the negative. You only talk about the positive, which is just not true. My response is and was, I can't mention every bad Sam Darnold stat every time we talk about him, but I think it's been pretty well established. He's on his third team now. And the stock, while maybe it went up a little at the end of last year, is still overall down from draft stock 2018. I think that's pretty obvious. But then I heard yesterday something that Tom Pelissero said on Rich Eisen's show, and it did get me thinking a little bit about the right question and the wrong question when it comes to Sam Darnold. And I think we ask these conversations with Darnold are sometimes based on the wrong question with Darnold as opposed to the right question. So the wrong question that gets asked with Darnold is, why does Kyle like him? When we talk about 55 interceptions or poor completion percentage or on his third team or any of those things, those are all, why does Kyle like Sam Darnold questions, right? That's all us trying to figure out what it is that he sees that has taken Darnold and put him in a quarterback competition with Trey Lance. We could ask those same questions about Trey. But the right question is, how much does Kyle believe in Sam? Not why does he believe in Sam? We know he does for some reason, but we know that he does. The question is how much. And, the question with that is TBD. But when I heard Pelissero talk yesterday, I didn't want to go conspiracy theory. I'm not going conspiracy theory, but it did get me thinking of a thought that sometimes that could sound like a conspiracy theory. What Pelissero said yesterday to Rich Eisen is two things about Brock Purdy: that going to Jacksonville to work with Will Hewlett and the orthopedic surgeon Tom Gormley is not just about rehab, but it's also about working on his mechanics. And then he said, if he's healthy and the Niners are comfortable from a medical perspective, he'll play week 1. He's on track, that sort of thing. But when I heard him say, and the Niners are comfortable from a medical perspective, it made me think, how much does Kyle Shanahan believe in Sam Darnold? And does he believe in him enough to not just make a tie go Darnold's way with Trey Lance? And we don't know that that's what's going to happen. We just know that for the second week in a row, Schefter and Breer have basically said that. But I can already hear the people saying, we don't know that's what's going to happen. That's true. You're right. We don't know that ties go to Sam Darnold. But it made me wonder, would a tie go to Darnold, not head-to-head with Brock, but if Brock is ready in the sense that Brock would play if C.J. Beathard or Nick Mullins were the backup, but not ready enough to play under every single circumstance, does Kyle believe in Sam Darnold enough to let him play early and just give Brock another week? That is not what I expect is going to happen. I think at this point, the trend for Brock Purdy's recovery is good and that we're going to see him by week 1. But things can change. Things happen all the time. It's only June 28th. We haven't even had 4th of July yet. All right. Brock's every single one of us, you, me, every single one of us has got to get through next week, meaning not jumping off the bed of a pickup truck, not blowing off a thumb. Somebody watching this or not watching this, but somebody out there is going to blow off a thumb next week. So let's get everybody through next week, okay? Don't fall off a roof wrestling, playing ping pong. Just don't do anything stupid, okay? Anything can happen. So it's only June 28th. Let's get through the week, and then let's get through the next week, and then let's get through the next week when it comes to Brock. But I was listening yesterday to our own podcast. Yesterday on our podcast feed, I posted a interview that John and I did with Parag Marathe back in 2018. But before I didn't just blindly post it. Before posting it, I went back and listened to it just to see if it would still hold up. And I think it did. I would check it out. I think a lot of people, Parag doesn't do a ton of interviews. So if you haven't heard him talk, a lot of you are new in the last 5 years. Maybe you heard it and you forgot. I heard it. I did the interview and I went back and listened to it again. So he said a lot of good stuff. He talks about, I'll do a little promo here before I play this clip that I want to play as it relates to this conversation. But he talks about doing the Jimmy trade. He talks about doing the Jimmy extension. He talks about why the old draft value chart that everybody uses, or a lot of people use, is outdated. He talks about the game management aspect of a game management chart. He talks about the game management mistake that a lot of teams and coaches make. He talks about negotiating with Richard Sherman. He talks about negotiating. He tells a couple good stories about the Alex Smith draft and why Tom Condon, Alex Smith's agent, sent him a cease and desist letter. I'd forgotten that Don Yee was Bryant Young's agent, and that the 49ers had done a lot of deals with Don before they did the Jimmy Garoppolo, or had worked with him. Parag had worked with him before the Jimmy deal. We hit a little, like very little, on soccer. Obviously, Parag's been in the news, especially these last few weeks and days, as the 49ers try to complete the purchase of Leeds. So there's just a lot of stuff there that I think is, and we just talk about him, how he got his start. So there's a lot of good Parag stuff, and I would go check out that pod. Anyway, the other part of how much does Kyle Shanahan believe in Sam Darnold goes back 6 years. It goes back to the 2018 draft when Sam Darnold was drafted. And it was funny, John asked Parag a question in that interview. He said, you guys were 0-8 when you did the Jimmy Garoppolo deal. The Jimmy Garoppolo trade was on October 30th, 2017. The 49ers were 0-8. And he said, did you consider the possibility that Belichick was going to ask for your first round pick? Because he said, that's what I would have wanted, your first round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo. And Parag said, yes, we went through everything. We tried to consider all these possibilities. Now, remember, Jimmy had not played a lot. Jimmy was going to be a free agent. So a second round pick in the end was reasonable. But of course, if you've got the asset, it's definitely reasonable to ask for a first round pick and then shop it around and see if anybody will give you a first round pick. But that day, basically what Schefter reported was that they only started conversations about the trade the day that it happened, or that morning. So, it happened very quickly. But the point is that the 49ers were in line for the number one pick. As it turned out, going winless that year would not have guaranteed you the number one pick, because the Browns got the number one pick and they were winless. So we could have, we were a long way. 0-8's a long way from 0-16 at the time, but they were almost, they were on there. They were halfway to being winless, basically. But anyway, we got into the conversation about all the considerations, not of the trade. We got into that conversation too, but of signing Jimmy. And I think it applies here to Sam a little bit. Niners were 0-8. They do the deal. They trade for Jimmy. They then lose again. They're 0-9. Then the 49ers have a huge game with the Giants. The 49ers are 0-9. The Giants are 1-7. Okay, so you could argue maybe the first pick is on the line here. The Niners won the game. I have not checked the highlights. Some of you might remember the game. I cannot picture in my mind's eye these plays, but apparently CJ Beathard threw a 83-yard touchdown to Marquise Goodwin, and a 47-yard touchdown to Garrett Selleck. So maybe, the Niners have had their explosive quarterback. And the Niners beat Ben McAdoo and Eli Manning. Then they lose to Seattle at the end of September. So they're 1-10. And Jimmy plays at the very end of that game. You are 100% thinking quarterback draft, at least partly. Your scouting department. When you're 1-10 at the end of November, you're thinking about Baker, you're thinking about Darnold, you're thinking about Josh Allen, thinking about Josh Rosen, right? Then Jimmy comes in, they win 5 straight, Niners finish 6-10. But I want to play something that Parag said. This is in 2018, so they'd already done the Jimmy extension. If you remember that game, then you can fill me in on everything that happened. But this is 2018. They just done the extension. The draft had passed. This interview was actually June, I think, 14th, or it aired. We posted it June 14th of 2018. So the draft is passed. They drafted Mike McGlinchey. And this is what Parag said. And the reason I think it's interesting is because it's not, I think what it shows is that just acquiring Jimmy, as they did, was to set up kind of an audition for him. But they still had other options out there. They still, when they acquired him, they didn't know he was going to win 5 straight and they'd go 6-10 and, they fall out of like the top 3, top 4 draft market. They didn't know that was going to happen. They did know Kirk Cousins was going to be a free agent, which you'll hear Parag mentioned a great white shark. So I'll play this. And I think what this illustrates is that, well, let's play it and then we'll talk about it.
It was week by week, it was slowly us crossing off the other options. Like, for example, as we kept winning, the possibility of having a top 3, top 4 pick and getting a chance at one of these great quarterback draft quarterbacks, those started, checking off. Like, that's not going to be an option anymore. We're cool with that, but that's not going to be an option anymore. Then you had the great white shark that you're going through that stuff, that discussion. And then in my mind, I was always
we'll see.
and then in my mind, it was just like waiting for them to give me the go, waiting for them John and Kyle to give me the go that we want to build with this guy.
So they consider it. What he's saying is we uncovered every stone, and what that means is, we considered the draft. Of course, they were a winless team. They were a 1-win team at the end of November. Then Jimmy has to play. Out goes Beathard. In comes Jimmy. And they win a bunch of games. And they, at the time, signed Jimmy to momentarily the largest QB contract, which was another part, actually, that Parag was very right about. He says in that interview, we did a lot of evaluating. We felt pretty good that this contract that was going to be the biggest would not be the biggest long, and that's just where quarterback salaries were going. But all of this is to say, to go back to the original conversation, that Kyle, and it's the same reason I thought they would have picked up Baker Mayfield if they could have last year. All these quarterbacks were on his mind and their mind back in 2017 before they got Jimmy Garoppolo, right? One of these guys was about to be a 49er. Maybe. Because Kirk Cousins was out there. So maybe it was going to be Kirk. But they were considering all of those options. And Sam Darnold, Baker goes 1, Sam goes 3rd, because Indy traded with the Jets. The Jets were 5-11 that year. They weren't, they were bad, but they weren't the Browns bad. The Bills were 9-7 that year. They traded up from 12 with Tampa to get Josh Allen. And, Josh Rosen, the Cardinals traded from 15 to 10. So everybody traded up outside of the winless Browns to get a quarterback. And the Niners would have been right in the thick of that. The Niners would have been, they were in the thick of it. They could have traded up for Josh Allen, definitely, because the Bills came from behind them to do that deal. But, if they don't win those last 5 games, they would have been right. They were right in the thick of the Sam Darnold evaluation. And that's where we go all the way back to, how much does Kyle believe before Sam came to the NFL that there was a future franchise quarterback in that body? And if you're going to play devil's advocate to the, hey, hasn't Kyle watched this guy play now? You would also say bad situation, right? We've talked about it. We've worn that one out. Bad situations, blah, blah, blah. What about if he's with me? So that's the question. How much has Sam's career to this point damaged what Kyle Shanahan thought of him originally when they did some initial, now maybe Kyle is in the middle of a winless season, so he's not watching a ton of SC tape, but he's getting the reports. He's aware of them. And they're thinking about the big picture. It's Kyle's first year. So, even Prague even says it. There's a point where they're winless, and him and John and Kyle and Jed and Bob Lang, who was in charge of PR at the time, they're hanging out in the office post-loss. And it was not a heads are about to roll atmosphere. They understood they had a long runway. The Niners had been very bad. The franchise had been in disarray. So, it was different than other winless seasons, I think, where the coach could probably look around and take a little stock of the big picture if he wanted to. And he liked Baker. I think he could, like, if we go through that draft, would Kyle have liked this player? I think he would have liked Baker. And I think he would have liked Sam. Would he have liked Josh Allen? Easy to say now that he would have. That completion percentage was pretty low coming out of college. Would he have liked Josh Rosen? I don't think he would have liked the guy. So I think it might have been Darnold. Maybe the Baker personality might have turned him off. Of those four guys, I think it's most likely that he would have liked Sam Darnold as his quarterback. Could have been Baker. It could have gone two ways on the personality, so he might have liked it. But it might have been 6 years ago this guy was a real consideration or would have become one. Hell, they might have done what Indy did. What they did. Traded up to 3. Indy did it. The Niners just did it. Traded up to 3 and gone, now let's figure out what we want to do. So, Kyle's desire to finally get the answer on whether or not he can make Sam Darnold a winning quarterback, you have to acknowledge as part of this. You cannot simplify this down to, well, he's got 55 picks, or he hasn't had a good completion percentage, or all that stuff is true. I mean, it's 100. There's no arguing about that. There's not two sides of that. Like, we agree it has not been good. And just to make clear, because I think I say it every time we talk, coming out of OTAs, I said I don't think Sam Darnold looks any better than Trey Lance. I'm not seeing it right now. But do ties go to Sam in Kyle's mind is the question. And would a tie go to Sam if he thinks Brock is 98% and not 100%? Does he want to see Sam Darnold play? KP says, man, all these reporters act like they know the Niners' plans better than the Niners. Well, a couple of things. One, some of it is unplanned, right? Like, I'm asking, what does Kyle think of Sam? It doesn't mean that Kyle is giving, it doesn't mean he's leaning one way or the other in terms of a tie goes to Trey or a tie goes to Sam. But I'm going to need at some point people to use something other than all these people predicted Mac Jones. Did not. But other people predicted Mac Jones to the Niners as the example that you can never believe any reports. You're going to miss real information if you disqualify every person that predicted the Niners were going to draft Mac Jones. If you disqualify their reporting, you're going to disqualify a lot of legitimate reporting. So, Hugh says, I think a lot of these national reporters want to see Trey fail because they predicted the Niners were picking Mac Jones. They are spouting their opinions based on that bias. I don't think that's the case, although it's a theory I haven't heard yet. So, Hugh, I give you at minimum credit for the original theory. I think the Niners are really good for the national NFL's business. So I think it'd be foolish for those people to root against Trey Lance succeeding. It's foolish for them to root against any top quarterback succeeding, right? The league is better. The NFL Network gets more eyeballs. McAfee gets more eyeballs. NFL media like all of it. When Mahomes is good and Lamar is good and Josh Allen is good and Justin Herbert is good, like, they should be rooting for Tua to succeed. So, now that said, I will say this, Hugh, if we're going to go conspiracy theory, people's personal your personal agenda can get caught up in other takes sometimes. But I don't, I think it, what's the saying? Cut off your nose to spite your face. I think it'd be counterproductive to root. I mean, like for Trey to succeed would mean more success for just the whole operation, which is NFL media. So I don't, again, not insane though, not crazy. That may sound like a backhanded compliment. It's not crazy. I'm all for talking out some ideas here. Mark asked, does Kyle think Darnold could have a Geno Smith-like resurgence if asked to start? Good question. We don't know the answer to that, right? Which a lot of people say, we don't know. It's true, we don't know. But I mean, that's the idea. Although, is Geno going to be the Seahawks quarterback in 3 years? I'd bet against it. I said the other day, if Geno had put together 8 games like that for the 49ers and then gotten hurt, his first 8, remember, Geno's season last year was kind of a tale of 2 seasons. But for half the season, he was a legitimate MVP candidate. If he'd done that and then gotten hurt for the Seahawks or for the Niners, like I said the other day, if you put that first 8 games on the Niners, people would be losing their minds right now about, or, if he finished the season with those 8 games, people would be losing their minds right now about what Geno Smith on the Niners is going to be like. And, the reality is that it came back to earth a little bit. So does Kyle think that? I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question. We don't know what he thinks. Stovey says the whole QB drama starts with Kyle. All he had to do was start Trey in 21 and cut Jimmy. Instead of in 22. Yeah, I mean, that's, that was the miscalculation. I'll speak for myself by me, that Trey Lance was in a good position to develop because he was going to be around a lot of great players. He didn't have to play right away. In hindsight, Trey Lance needed to play. All that said, the 49ers, did go to the NFC Championship game. So I mean, to say that Trey Lance, the Niners would be in a better spot if Trey Lance had started 2021, I don't think we can say that. Eric says, Crocky. So they traded a second midseason for Jimmy, not knowing if they'd keep him long term. That's really wild. Well, I mean, that's me talking it through. I'm not saying that may not be correct, right? The plan also, here's the alternative plan. They were going to keep him long term. It was just going to be cheaper than what it ended up being. You could argue that what I said earlier as being one of the possible scenarios is wrong. That once they traded for him, it was over. Like they were going to extend him. He was going to be a free agent. Once they traded for him, the Kirk Cousins thing was over. Once they traded for him, the draft thing was over. But the reason I said it was if you just playing that Parag clip, and maybe Crocky, that's what you're responding to, is Parag saying the more Jimmy played, the more it checked off boxes, right? The more they won, the more it got harder to justify drafting a quarterback. The more it got easier to pay Garoppolo. And the more you looked at it and said, well, if this guy's just at least Kirk Cousins, Kirk's going to be more expensive than this guy. That's the part we don't know. But that's what listening to that Parag clip made me wonder. Were they open to like just some trial period with Jimmy and then pivoting to the draft? The other thing they could have done, and maybe this is the most likely scenario, is let's say Jimmy plays 4 games, CJ doesn't get hurt, and Jimmy plays the last few weeks of the season, maybe, or doesn't play at all, and his extension is smaller, and they don't win 5 in a row, and they finish instead of 6-10, 3-13, and they're drafting near the top of the draft. What do? Do they also draft? Do they trade back and take a quarterback there? Do they take Saquon Barkley? My guess would be that, they take McGlinchey at like 5? Do they take Quentin Nelson? Do they take Bradley Chubb? Like that would have been my guess, was maybe they take Bradley. Do they take Vita Vea really high? They passed on Vita anyway. But, I guess that possibility existed that Jimmy comes in. They're like, well, he's good, stopgap. we'll keep him, and then we'll also draft a guy. Does that possibility exist? Maybe. I don't know. We don't know. But the one thing you take out of that Prague clip is that they became more sure of Jimmy as time went on, which makes you wonder, what their other options were even once they acquired him. Because Jimmy coming into their lives kind of fell out of the sky. They had already had all their other plans kind of lined up. So it does make sense, right? If you've got, all right, we got a Kirk Cousins pursuit. We're going to have to go heavy in the draft. We get all your scouting stuff in order. And then when the season ends, Kyle, we're going to Baker's pro day. We're going to Darnold's pro day. We're going to Josh Allen's pro day. We're going to Josh Rosen's pro day. Maybe we're going to Lamar Jackson's pro day. He probably would have gone to, who's another quarterback taking the draft? What's some weird quarterback pro day that the Niners would who would have been the guy that'd be like, the Niners considered, God, this is a bad QB draft. Let's see here. The Niners would have been at, Mason Root, Kyle Laletta. Are the Niners are the Niners falling in love with Kyle Laletta? Right. So there would have been some of that maybe. But the point is that they had all this. This was part of the big picture season. This was year one. So they had, what are we going to do? How are we going to find a quarterback? All that planned out. And then Jimmy just falls in their lap. They probably didn't scrap everything immediately. Hey, Jimmy just fell in our lap for a second. Let's see what happens. He was going to be a free agent, and he was attractive. One thing Parag says in that interview is that every interview they did, in our interview, that every interview they did in 2017 with a potential coach, Jimmy Garoppolo came up as a quarterback option. So everybody in the league that year was talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. Thanks for the $2. Kyle did say the competition won't start till camp. All right. Well, let's believe that Kyle's going to go in with a totally blank mind and just give everybody just not have any preconceived notions about anything. I just can't believe that. Let's see. We got some people arguing with each other. Oh, okay. Yeah. Reacting. Yeah. That's how I heard it. That's how I heard it. Charlie says these reporters have some weight in the league, man, and they don't get where they are by peddling lies. I agree. I keep saying it. If you want to just dismiss everything Schefter says, or everything Breer says, or everything Garofolo says, or anything any of these guys say, Silver, just because they said that I was going to draft Mac Jones, then you're going to miss more information than you gain. So, my prediction yesterday was in the next week we're going to get another, just a Darnold thing. Peter King, somebody's going to do. Well, we'll see. Maybe not next week. Maybe the week after. Karen Hardy says the drama is unnecessary. They'll figure it out in camp. A lot depends on Brock's recovery time. The coaches know more than they can say. Trey can prove people right or wrong. I agree with that. I mean, I 100% agree. Trey, this thing's not. We talk about this thing all the time like it's over. I don't ever want to do that. It's not over. There's still football to be played by healthy players, and then there are also going to be hurt players. That's what Kyle's history tells us. Unfortunately, we hope that doesn't happen. But so, yeah, there is still a lot here to play out. There's still a lot here to play out. The question is, what is Kyle's? Is Sam Darnold just an available arm that the Niners decided to sign, or is he a player that Kyle has believed in for 6 years and it's finally getting his chance with? We'll see. But we still have gone 6. Yeah. Anyway, so we got to run. We got to get on with our days here, you and I. But it was fun. It was fun going back and listening to that old Parag interview and maybe getting some insight on also what's going on now. So go check out, if you want to go hear some more of that Parag interview, go check it out. We enjoyed doing it 5 years ago, and I think it still holds up today. And if you're here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Check out we appreciate that. Helps the show. Check out the GameTime app. If you're buying tickets to anything, go to the GameTime app, use the code HAM, get $20 off. And yeah, thanks for hanging with us, everybody. Summer rolls on. Summer hours roll on. Later.